Hi there. So, you want to learn a bit about game art? Well, that's great. You've come to the right place. Please sit back, relax, grab yourself some strawberry pie, and enjoy as we figure out the age-old question: why has nobody on YouTube thought of making a video breaking down the stylistic decisions made when the designers were creating the visual aesthetic for the platformer game Celeste? Oh, and also, why is this art good? If you aren't familiar with this 2018 release by Extremely OK Games and Matt Makes Games, Madeline is trying to deal with panic anxiety and depression, so she goes to climb a mountain, which is the next logical step, of course. The mountain brings out a part of her, a voice in her head given a physical form. This part of Madeline constantly says she's trying to help her stay out of danger, but honestly it looks like she's doing more harm than... what's that? Oh! I get, that's good. It's a story where the mountain represents her struggle, and oh boy is there all her struggle. In the form of dying. Get a controller or suffer with a mouse and keyboard, like I did. Honestly, it's your choice. So, Celeste. Well, firstly, gosh dang is this game aesthetic. Everything from character design readability to color choice to environment design is all just really, really nice. Just to break up this rant into sections, I'll be discussing what makes effective game pixel art in 3 major topics, and showing you how this game about a big hill and anxiety considers some core elements to just make some art. So let's start with style. Style is quite a broad term, especially for just art in general. In game art, what you're looking for in an art style is consistency and intent. By consistency, I mean that everything in the world seems to belong, and there's not like a heckin' 3D model in the middle of a 2D game. That would be stupid. This implies keeping pixel sizes consistent in a game world, and making it very distinct that all of the locations in the game, no matter how they differ environmentally, look like they work in one universe. Consistency is pretty easy to spot. If outline is added to an important object, then is it utilized on other important things? If dithering is a big part of texturing in a tile set, do all tiles have it? Simply, do things fit together? I think that this one's quite obvious in Celeste's case, being, well, yeah, everything fits well together and has a really nice, charming and cute tone art-wise. The story has some slightly deeper themes in mind, but it also balances an organic and vibrant aesthetic. All that stuff's obvious, right? Well, actually, there's another part of this that I'd like to discuss. Being consistent gives yourself some restrictions to make things feel familiar or comfortable to the player. I know that this is an important object because, like the others, it has an outline. I know how this behaves because I know how the others behave. The challenge is then flipping that expectation on its head entirely, and still making it work. This is part of you, or as the community has dubbed her, Madeline. She's the side of you who acts with hatred and anxiety, but also is the part of you that you have to learn to acknowledge. This means she's portrayed as a rebellious and impulsive character. How? Well, firstly, by her dialogue, but this is even more enforced through the art. The entire time we're playing, the developers put us into this idea that the dialogue box up there is just a way of viewing what the characters say. Obviously, this is just UI and not in the game world. You see their little heads as they... It's all adorable. When suddenly Madeline comes here and just straight up breaks the fourth wall casually. This might not seem that significant, but it really emphasizes her character, and by breaking those layers of consistency in an intentional way, it just goes that extra bit further in showing you her personality visually. The interesting thing that you've probably noticed by now is that Celeste actually has 2 styles. The pixel art one for platforming gameplay, and the other one where, you know, they all actually have faces. There is a reason for this decision though, which is the fact that they were working on such a small resolution that they really just didn't need to include a clear face in the smaller sprites to make the characters distinguished. However, because it's a character-driven story, developers knew the intent they were going for and gave the characters facial expressions, which ended up being a very clever solution, as it still conveyed the emotion they wanted. Happy, angry, scared, this... what even... Yes, things can look nice, and even look nice together, but in a game, that doesn't really matter if the player has literally no idea what's going on. This is where the next bit comes in. Readability. I've spoken about this on the channel before, right here, but never specifically for game design. For video games, you don't just have to worry about readability for a single sprite. No, that would be too easy. Now you have to think about everything going with everything else in every way possible, because the player has free will and control. Here's Madeline in a blank space. Pretty easy to see her, right? Cool. Now, let's just add some ground tiles, maybe the obstacles now, some particles, other characters, these moving blocks, the background, the Spanish Armada, some bloom, and... yeah, contrast might be important, you know? So, how do they do it? How do they make Madeline so visible, even with all of that going on? Well, contrast comes in many different flavors. Shape, texture, line, size, and space, just to name a few. But the one that Celeste seems to like using to distinguish things like the foreground and the background is a little thing you may have heard of called color. Color contrast comes in the form of value, pure temperature, and saturation. Let's just grab the background from Chapter 1 Forsaken City real quick, and throw it behind Madeline. Notice how it's darker, slightly colder in hue, and more desaturated than the colors on Madeline, which is really needed in a fast-paced platformer such as this one. Now, let's get a lighter background now. What about Chapter 4? Still quite easy to see. The foreground elements have what's known as temperature contrast, as the blocks are purple, a cold color, and the background is orange-yellow, a warmer hue. And for Madeline, some of the colors contrast in saturation too. But the most obvious thing, definitely, is that outline. It really helps in making the position and form of her noticeable, and that means that people can do crap like this and somehow still see what's happening. What even... speedrunning is cool. The other part's readability, aside from contrast, is just making sure the player knows what they themselves are doing. When they press a button, there should be feedback, just so that they know that something's happened. If the dash was simply a faster movement, someone might have forgotten they've used their dash in the air already, and try and use it again without anything happening. With the massive impact and trail, as well as your hair becoming blue when you've run out of your dash, you're probably more likely to notice it, while the effect is still not too over the top, because you'll be seeing it a lot and you don't want it to be too intrusive. Same with these sweat particles, when Madeline's climbing, indicating clearly to the player she's running out of stamina. Art is there to aid gameplay, and that's exactly what you see happening. So if you die, honestly, skill issue. So what's the difference art-wise between Celeste and Super Mario Bros? You might say, oh, the colours, the screen size, the fact that Madeline isn't an Italian plumber, and to that I say, fair enough. However, these, apart from the Italian plumber thing of course, all stem from one fact, that Super Mario Bros. Was developed for a cartridge with 320 kilobits of space, and Celeste can be downloaded on an Orion X2 dual-system PC Intel Core i9 processor. In brief, gaming technology has advanced unimaginably fast in the past 40 years, and that's pretty freaking cool. Pixel art is now a choice of style rather than a necessity, so whether or not it was because of the pixel medium being the creator's dream to create such faultless resplendence from the simplicity of tiny squares, or whether it was the lack of time and money, you can do a lot more compared to the 8 and 16-bit days. So, given that, how does Celeste incorporate the new possibilities brought about through a digital platform into pixel art, with the style having roots as one of the oldest looks in gaming history? Let's start with probably one of the most standout techniques, that is, dynamic lighting. Not all newer pixel art games add more technologically advanced effects to their art, especially if they're trying to preserve the nostalgic 16-bit look, such as Shovel Knight, and yeah, that's a cool style. For cowards! I think that Celeste just really captures the retro look of pixel art implemented alongside newer, more advanced effects. The art is relatively simple, just normal pixel art, and things like the collectible strawberries and dash refills resembling power-ups give you hints of 80s platformer games. But then, we're hit with this lighting, which really ties the environment together, and gives each location a distinct atmosphere, evoking the eerie dark of loneliness while exploring the mirror temple, lighting each of those candles while moving with apprehension, creating that soft ambience in reflection when you've fallen to the bottom of the mountain and almost lost all hope, heightening your senses during the intense dream chase against Badlin. Without all this lighting, yeah, the levels would still work, but the atmosphere just really wouldn't be as strong, and honestly, it's probably one of the best aspects of the game world. In terms of technology, this is something that a lot of people have probably overlooked, but the movement of Madeline feeling good isn't just down to tweaking speed and distance variables. Obviously, the movement is the main part, but it's also about what occurs visually when you move. Let's talk about how they really sell this fluid motion effect. Well, This hair is not real, but none of us probably are either, so, I mean... This is procedural pixel art, where the funny machine does funny calculations to draw shape, which is actually the hair. And it really makes movement feel as if it were one organic motion. This procedural hair trails behind the player, which adds to the smooth action of movement as a whole. Pretty important in a game about moving a lot. There's also this interpolation on the X and Y scale of the sprite, which is just a fancy way of saying squash and stretch. It gives Madeline this really responsive feel since she's reactive to the environment. My point is, all of this is pretty nice and gives the player feedback for an action, even if they only subconsciously notice it, which always adds to the juiciness of the game. There's so much more to be said, like the subtle gamma boost and wash of colour in Chapter 7 compared to the rest of the levels, the mechanics of the world all being so readable, the heckin' water. Like, look at that. Look at it, Martin. Are you calling this a lazy? In all seriousness, I hope you enjoyed this video, or at least learned something along the way about game juice, pixel art, style, readability, and how the art of Celeste just works so well. Feel free to join the Discord, link in the description, if you want to share your art, chill with other people, or have questions on your mind, like if non-secular nations politically impede society's freedom of worship. And until next time, have a good life, and I'll see you later.